Jacksonville. A child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. The poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The Weekman was on the 24th of November 2018, beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Today we'll focus on a number of things. The 4th National Climate Change Report, and we'll talk about it. And we have an article by Uncle Carl Rove. He is on Fox this time with an opinion. We'll also look at his topic is Nancy Pelosi. We looked at it. I don't have it now, but we looked at an article about the numerous people that oppose Nancy Pelosi. We'll get to that in a minute also. And we'll have sports scores that vanished last night. A brief article on Betty DeVos and where she is with these for-profit schools, which is a nightmare within themselves. But firstly, let me just switch up here a little bit, make some announcements as to where we are with our scheduling for the weekend. We have Numbers Man later today. That is the that is the macroeconomics program that we normally present on the weekends. We also have an open source report that will probably come later today. Our technical report where we talk about open source, Library software, and hardware. We'll be talking about that. Mergers between or IBM's actual buyout, I should say, of Red Hat, as is a software provider, to the cloud. We'll also look at some other things. Now before I forget here, our tribute to Jerry Pippen. Jerry Pippen would have been 79 years old on tomorrow, which is Sunday the 25th of November. He was born the 25th of November 1939. So we would be remembering him. We hope to have some call-in. If not, we'll have some canned presentation, and we'll also provide some commentary for that. Let me just take a quick peek here. I guess we'll start off with Medicare for All. This is by the Rand Corporation. We've used them before. They were involved in the Vietnam War. For those that remember that, they did a lot of work. This is their blog, more recent blog, I'm assuming. Nonetheless, they explore Medicare for All. Sounds good, but what does it mean? This is by David Anderson, Jody Liu, and Mark Freiberg. Medicare is a popular program that enjoys broad political support, perhaps seeking to borrow a popular brand. They call it a brand. Some has proposed Medicare for all. Of course, Bernie Sanders has been behind that movement and his progressive organization. Anyway, nonetheless, Medicare for all, Medicare extra for all, Medicare buy it as a means of expanding and improving health care coverage in the U.S. for individuals younger than 65 years old. The newly formed Medicare for All caucus has more than 70 founding members, that is in the House of Representatives, including several potential 2020 presidential candidates. Yet there is a substantive variation in proposed plans, and public support for plans vary greatly depending on the language used. For policy analysis, such as high-level proposals, quickly draw a question: what do they really mean for Medicare? Medicare has multiple components. Traditional Medicare, now that is Part A and Part B, or also called original Medicare, our fee-for-service Medicare, Medicare Advantage, Part C, excuse me, and the Medicare Prescription Program, Part D. Each of these components require a separate premium. Parts C and D are offered by private insurers, individuals for their spouse who pay Medicare taxes for at least 40 quarters, do not pay premiums for Part A. That is a hospital insurance. Beneficiaries pay Part B medical insurance starting at $134 per month in 2018 and increasing with the beneficiary's income. Traditional Medicare also has deductibles and co-insurance, and surprisingly to some, does not have an out-of-the-pocket maximum. More than 80% of Medicare beneficiaries have a source of supplemental coverage beyond traditional Medicare, whether it be through Medicaid Advantage, employer-sponsored plans, Mega Gap, Medicaid, or other coverage combinations. Part B premiums vary by plan and cover hospitals and medical services. Premiums for Part D plans vary by plan and beneficiary. What this means is basically any of these programs could be modified for all, period. If Medicare for All invokes an expansion of traditional Medicare, as its proponents should make explicit and explain whether and how these they propose to address the coverage limitations of traditional Medicare. Medicare is designed for from the beneficiary's perspective. For beneficiary perspective, traditional Medicare has two key shortcomings in terms of benefit design. No cap on out-of-pocket spending, like other insurance products. Each part of Medicare, traditional Medicare, features a cost sharing that is a consumer's out-of-the-pocket expense via deductible co-pays, co-insurance, and other gaps in coverage. The main limitation of traditional Medicare is a lack of out-of-pocket maximum and annual beneficiary spending limit. The sum of deductibles, co-pays, and co-insurance across all service categories beyond which insurance it covers all additional costs. In contrast, qualified health plans, those offering market prices under the Affordable Care Act, can charge an individual no more than $7,350 in 2018. That goes up in 2019. Having an out-of-pocket maximum matters, as out-of-the-pocket maximum in the main mechanism used in insurance companies to guard against catastrophic financial loss. For example, an individual in Iowa in 2017 generated $12 million in paid claims. Due to complex genetic disease, these claims were covered by a qualified health plan, which placed a fixed ceiling on no more than $7,350 on the patient's out-of-pocket costs. Had this individual been on a Medicare, the patient would have faced $268,000 Plan B's drugs in out-of-pocket costs, assuming the 200 infusion visits with a co-insurance amounted no greater than Medicare Part A deductible provision. In addition, traditional Medicare has an annual and lifetime limit on hospital coverage. Qualified medical plans are not allowed to place such limits on any service. For example, an individual who needs to be hospitalized for 180 days in a benefit year would have an entire hospital stay covered if the beneficiary is enrolled in a qualified health plan. However, the individual is insured by Medicare. Coverage stops after 150 days of hospitalization. Although multi-million-dollar claims in a single year are infrequent, insurance is supposed to protect individuals from rare and catastrophic expense shocks. Traditional Medicare does not do this. For this reason, many Medicare beneficiaries buy additional supplemental, they call it Medigap insurance. Holes in traditional coverage. Qualified healthcare plans are required to offer categories of essential healthcare benefits. These benefits include limited dental, vision, for children, prescription drug coverage, hospital care, and professional services. In contrast, Medicare offers neither vision nor dental service coverage, and other essential health benefits are offered a la carte, depending on which part of Medicare beneficiaries enroll in. Individuals covered by Medicare can have most of the essential health benefits required for qualified health plans if they enroll in Parts A, B, and D, which we are enrolled in. Throw that in. And they can build their own benefits by choosing inpatient, outpatient coverage. That's Parts A and B, which while declining prescription drug coverage. Beneficiaries can elect to fill in some of the coverage gaps in traditional Medicare's complex benefits designed by purchasing the Medigap. Now, this year, Medicare Advantage kicks in more, and a lot of these plans out offering zero premium coverage. But the problem with them, we'll do a show on the problem is that they have a lot of co-pays, a lot of hidden things in there. Medicare coverage and functions like Medicaid supplement plans is not paid for and integrated in with employer or union provided coverage. That's PFD. And we'll finish this up now. The meaning of Medicare for all. Traditional Medicare is popular, therefore can lead to a good brand name to coverage expansion proposal, but its limits can be significant for some people. Those proposing and evaluating Medicare for all proposals should consider whether and how these limits are added. The details of policy proposals that either extend the scope of Medicare coverage or cost sharing or establish a new benefit package have ramifications for enrollees' finances and access to cure. Now, Anderson is with the Duke University Center Healthcare Policy, and Lou is an associate policy researcher at the nonprofit. She's at RAND, and Freiberg is a senior natural scientist at RAND. And the commentary published on the 19th of November 2018 in Health Affairs blog there. And anyway, that is where it came out. We thought we would throw this in for information purposes. There are other financial schemes out there. If you had Medicare for all people, no doubt it would be in their FICA deductions and perhaps raising it a percentage point. With any national coverage program like Medicare for all, on the front end, you are going to have more costs. But as you move along, it's the same thing with the Affordable Care Act. Various critics, parasites, etc., alarmists had said the Affordable Care Act would destroy health care, which it was obviously a lie. There are more people involved in health care than ever before, and it is one of the large components of GMP, no doubt about it. And if you tune into numbers, man, we bring that about proudly. So that is one thing to remember when people are talking about the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. It has not destroyed health care. In fact, it has enhanced health care. It is based upon a preventive medical visits, and those are very, very important to catch things like hypertension that have never been diagnosed, diabetes that have not been diagnosed, and get people into programs and or medication that will alleviate very serious problems in the future. Now, that when it gets into those longer hospital stays. Incidentally, don't have it here, but the average hospital stay these days is usually around a week or so, depending obviously on the situation, then to a rehabilitation facility. That's not mentioned here. I was reading somewhere, where was it, Upper Midwest, the governor there, Mark Dayton, was in the hospital for like a month. He perhaps might have been in rehabilitation, had a lung infection. Now, some things of that nature are a little bit different. While I'm here, the Giants co-owner, Charles Johnson, donated to other than Hyde Smith. A picture of him. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Johnson, the retired investment company billionaire, believed to hold one of the largest stakes in the Giants, is attracting attention for the second time in 2 months over a political contribution. Johnson and his wife each donated a maximum $2,700 to the campaign of none other than the infamous Sidney Hyde Smith in Mississippi, who faces Mike Espy, the former ag commissioner, and that election comes up next Tuesday. Hyde Smith has been on the fire, obviously, for talking when a video at a campaign rally in Tupelo, Mississippi surfaced, showing her expressing her regards for a rancher, saying if he invited me to a public hanging, I would be in the front row. No doubt she would. Her comments have become a major campaign issue because of the notorious history of lynchings in Mississippi of African Americans. We covered that debate, and you can go and watch the debate itself. The video has surfaced. Hyde Smith's also captured on video saying it would be a good idea to make it harder for some college students to vote. A 2014 photo of her donning a Confederate hat. Gee, boy. According to Johnson and his wife, they're in Palm Beach, Florida, donated $5,400 to Hyde Smith 9 days before her public hanging comment. Several corporations, including Walmart, AT&T, Pfizer, publicly renounced their support for Hyde Smith because they had to. And Hyde Smith's comments clearly do not reflect our company or associates. That's from Walmart. Last month's filing showed Johnson donated $1,000 to a super PAC called Black America for the President's Agenda. Oh boy, creating a racist robocall used during an Arkansas congressional election before the midterm. Johnson, who does not give interviews, keeps a low profile, issued a statement through the Giants renouncing the group. I had absolutely no knowledge of this donation to be used in this manner, and I, like the Giants organization, strongly condemned any forms of racism and in no way condone the advertisement that was created by this entity. Well, again, this is his second time around, and on our former producer O.T. Leo's situation, there are 2 strikes against old Johnson, and the 3rd strike they should remove him from NFL ownership. Fans expressed outrage on social media that Johnson had donated to this group. Several did so again on Thursday. Judd Legum, a political writer, publicized Johnson's donation to Hyde Smith. Giants officials, some of whom are away for the holidays, did not immediately have anything to say on this. Obviously, they are laying as low as they could possibly lay. We posted also on social media while we were here Dr. Olivia Hooker. She died on Wednesday at 103 years old, witnessed the ugliest moments in history. Times did a very good job of her. They show the Tulsa race riot there. One could call it the Tulsa apocalypse. One word using there, are the Tulsa Holocaust, and that's basically what it was. And we talked about that before. And Dr. Hooker, in an oral history recorded in 2015 for the White Plains Public Library, called it a terrible, catastrophic in Tulsa. That's in the very red state of Oklahoma. So we invite you to look at this particular, read this particular article. She's 103 years old, very long time. She'd even been in the Coast Guard. She'd been various places. She was at the Fordham University faculty. She got a PhD from the University of Rochester in 1961. She was on the Fordham University faculty. That's where DJ Trump went from 1963. I don't know if he had any classes from her. To 1985, an area of expertise included people with developmental intellectual disabilities. She helped found the American Psychological Association Division 33. So that is some of the life of Dr. Hooker, Professor Hooker, whatever you want to call her. There have been a number of these written there, a number of write-ups about her. And she was born in 1915 in Muskogee, Oklahoma, the same place Jerry Pippin was born. Very interesting there. So some lead in there. Let me go back quickly to segue to Uncle Carl Robe. We'll start here. Where is Uncle Carl? Here we go. On Nancy Pelosi, he's commenting here. Pelosi's bid to become the House Speaker is on a rocky path because of these Democrats, and 16 Democrat incumbent House members, representatives elected, and 2 Democrats who have, in races yet to be decided, released a letter on Monday announcing their opposition to the Speaker Pelosi, saying they support new leadership for the Democrats in the House. The signatories said Democrats want back the House with a message of change, real change. We promise to change the status quo, they wrote, and we intend to deliver on that. And some of the people that signed it: Cooper of Tennessee, Foster of Illinois, Higgins, where is he? New York, our own Stephen Lynch, a conservative legislator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and also Step Morton. I'm not sure why he's in this. Ed Permetta, of Colorado, Kathleen Rice of New York, Tim Ryan of Ohio, Linda Sanchez, she's from Orange County in California. And a number of other characters here. Some of these are middle-of-the-road people. The article that I read, some of these people have voted 20% to 30% of the time with DJ Trump, which really doesn't tell us very much. One recent addition there in that race has been decided. Ben McAdams of Utah, who defeated Nina Love in the campaign. He also talked about that. And Connor Lamb told the Pittsburgh paper, that's the Post-Gazette, in January, I think we need new leadership on both sides and there. So, but he did not sign the letter. Gil Soneros of California told the Chronicle in June. And remember, these are back in June. And most of these people in this political fishbowl called Washington will change positions, and many of those will be changing. Rashonda Tabletti, she's out of Michigan's 13. That used to be the district that John Conyers occupied. Was asked in August if she supported the speaker. She said no, probably not, before plummeting Pelosi for supporting big banks and supporting efforts that I don't think put people first there. So she is in the inner city of Detroit. She doesn't speak about the issues that are important to families, Tlaib said. I hope that's pronouncing it right. And Andy Kim, that's out of New Jersey, saying it's time we have new leadership. A lot of these people will say it's time they have new leadership, but when it comes to voting, it's sort of like what happened to Ms. Fudge of Ohio. She was going to run, then she decided, well, no, I will not run, period. And she got a position on a committee. Two darlings of Democratic left, that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and Ayanna Pressley. She represents parts of the city of Boston. Sidestepped the question of Pelosi during the campaign. Actually, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said she will vote for Pelosi, period. And I don't know what Presley will do, but many of these people will drip back to Pelosi. The no, not Pelosi crowd would give Pelosi a victory by voting a president, and that's probably what they will do, would lower the number needed to elect a speaker from 118 to one half of one of those voting for the candidate. Pelosi is likely to be speaker, even Uncle Carl knows that. And anyone's been to a goat roping contest. But she has much more work to do to get a majority. It would be won't be pretty if she does win. There will be wounds. Many House Democrats could find themselves defending unpopular votes back home, ones that promised constituents they would not cast. But after caving into pressure from Pelosi, at least the least popular politician in Washington at 28.5%. That's a real clear average. Anyway, that is that. Let's move to climate change, and we actually have the report here. The federal government did release a long awaited report with an unmistakable message: the effects of climate change, including deadly fires, those out in California, increasing debilitating hurricanes, and heat waves are already battering the U.S., and the danger of more such catastrophes is worsening. The report's authors, who represent numerous federal agencies, said they are now more certain than ever that climate change poses a severe threat to America's health and pocketbooks. That's the economy. And while it avoids policy recommendations, the report sense of urgency and alarm stands in a stark contrast to the lack of apparent plan from the administration of D.J. Trump. The congressionally mandated document, the first of its kind issued during the Trump administration, details how climate-fueled disasters and other types of worrisome changes, they call it. The western mountain ranges are retaining much less snow than throughout the year, and threatening water supplies below them. Coral reefs in the Caribbean, Hawaii, and Florida, and the U.S. Pacific territories. The authors argue that global warming is transforming where and how we live and presents global challenges to human health and quality of life. The impact we've seen the last 15 years have continued to be stronger and will only continue. That is from Gary Yohe, a professor of economics and environmental studies at Wesleyan University, who served on a national science panel. And let me finish this up and go to the actual report here. The report concludes that it appears possible for economic growth, at least in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, without increasing overall emissions of greenhouse gases. And in fact, one of these private space companies out in California wants to switch to mercury fuel, which we've been trying to get out of the environment, not put into the environment. Last time a national climate assessment was published in 2014, the Obama administration took the document seriously. Well, it won't happen this time. And the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration head wrote at the time, and D.J. Trump has cut these tailored findings help translate scientific insight into practical and usable knowledge, but can help decision makers and citizens anticipate and prepare for specific climate change impacts. That is what Catherine Sullivan wrote at the time. Normally I can see San Francisco Bay from my house. That is Ken Kadira, a senior researcher at the Carnegie Institute for Science. And today, for the past few days, I can't see the bay for all the smoke in the Pasadena fire. That was in Northern California. We've been reporting on it. Let me go to the climate change assessment. The summary of findings represent a high level of synthesis of material in the underlying report. The findings consolidate key messages and support evidence from 16 national level chapters, 10 regional chapters, and a chapter that focuses on societal response strategies, migration and adaptation, communities. Climate change creates new risks and exacerbates existing vulnerabilities in communities across the U.S., presenting growing challenges to human health, safety, and the quality of life and the rate of economic growth. The impact of climate change are already being felt in communities across the country. More frequently and intense extreme weather conditions, climate-related events, as well as changes in the average climate conditions are expected to continue to damage infrastructure, ecosystems, and social systems that provide essential benefits to communities. Future climate change is expected to further disrupt many areas of life and exacerbate existing challenges to prosperity posed by aging and deteriorating infrastructure, stressed ecosystems, and economic inequality. Impacts within and across regions will not be distributed equally. People who are always vulnerable, including lower incomes and other marginalized communities, have a lower capacity to prepare for and cope with extreme weather conditions. Climate-related events are expected to experience greater impacts. Prioritizing, adaptation actions for the most vulnerable populations would contribute to a more equitable future with in and across communities. Global action to significantly cut greenhouse gas emissions could substantially reduce climate-related risks and increase opportunities. I'll pinch this out. The economy without substantial and sustained global migration and regional adaptation efforts eliminate climate change is expected to cause growing losses to America's infrastructure, prosperity, and impede the rate of economic growth over this century. In the absence of significant global mitigation action and regional adaptation efforts, rising temperatures, sea levels rise, and a change in extreme events are expected to increasingly disrupt and damage critical infrastructure, property, labor, productivity, and the vitality of communities, regional economies, and industries that depend upon natural resources and favorable climate conditions, such as agriculture, tourism, fisheries, are vulnerable to growing impact of climate change. Rising temperatures are projected to reduce the efficiency of power generation while increasing energy demand, resulting in higher electricity costs. The impact of climate change beyond our borders are expected to affect our trade and economy, including the impact and export prices and U.S. Businesses with overseas operations and a supply chain. Some aspects of the economy may see slightly near temperature improvements in a modestly warmer world. However, the continual warming that is projected to occur without substantial and sustained reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions is expected to cause substantial net damage to the U.S. economy throughout this century, and especially in the absence of increased adaptation efforts with continual growth in emissions at historic levels. Annual losses in some economic sectors are projected to reach hundreds of billions of dollars by the end of the century, and more than current GNP across many states. And I won't go into this. Action to reduce it. Communities and governments and businesses are working together to reduce the risks and costs associated with climate change by taking action to lower greenhouse gases. Water, the quality, and we know this from Flint, Michigan, although that was delivered. The quality and quantity of water available for use by people and ecosystems across the country are being affected by climate change, increased risks and costs to agriculture, industry production, industry, recreation, and the environment. Health, here the impact of climate change, extreme weather conditions, and climate-related events. Air quality, and we saw that out in Berkeley, the Bay Area. The transmission of diseases through insects and pests. Food and water increasingly threaten the health and well-being of the American people, particularly populations that are already vulnerable. Indigenous people. Climate change increased threat to indigenous communities' livelihoods. We see that in Alaska and places of that nature. In Canada, economies and health and cultural identity by disrupting interconnected social, physical, and ecological systems. Ecological systems and ecological services and benefits they provide to society are being altered by climate change, and these impacts are projected to continue without substantial and sustained reduction in greenhouse emissions. Agriculture, rising temperatures, extreme heat, drought. We've seen a lot of drought in places like Texas and in California, wildfires on the range. Heavy downpours are expected to increasingly disrupt agriculture production in the U.S., and we saw that in the Midwest this year. Expected increases in challenge to livestock health, decline in crop yields or quality, and changes in extreme events in the U.S. and across threatened rural livelihoods and sustainable food security and prices. And then infrastructure, we won't go over this one, oceans and coasts. You see more of that. Coastal communities and ecosystems that support them are increasingly threatened by the impact of climate change. Even in the future, with a lower greenhouse emissions, many communities are expected to suffer financial impact as chronic high tide flooding leads to higher costs and lower property values. We see this in many areas. Tourism and recreation, outdoor recreation, and tourist economies, quality of life are relying on benefits provided by our natural environment that can be degraded by climate change. And that is the report in itself. We will append this report to this broadcast. Let me fly away here to ESPN and check on where we are. Oh, we're not doing too badly. In the NBA last night, the Rockets were at the oops, wait a minute here, just a second. I have some reason it likes to give me the wrong day. Now, the T-Wolves were at the Nets in New Jersey. T-Wolves 112-102. The Grizzlies were at the Clippers in Los Angeles. In overtime, the Clippers 112-107. The Rockets and Pistons in the Motor City, another overtime game, 116-111. Pistons. The Celtics and Hawks in Atlanta. It was the Celtics 114-96 for the Hawks. The Pelicans and Knicks in New York. Knicks 114-109. The Cavaliers and 76ers. It was the Cavaliers 121-112 for the 76ers. The Wizards and Raptors. It was the Raptors 125-107. The Spurs and Pacers in Indiana. It was the Spurs 111-100 for the Pacers. The Heat and Bulls in Chicago. The Heat 103, Bulls 96. The Hornets and Thunder in OKC. Thunder 109-104. The Suns and Bucks in Milwaukee. It was the Suns 116-114. And the Magic and Nuggets in Denver. The Nuggets 112-87 for the Magic. The Trailblazers and the Warriors. It was the Warriors 125-97. And finally, the Jazz and Lakers in Los Angeles as Lakers 90-83. On to college basketball. I hope we see some scores here. And we do have some scores, but I have to figure out where they are. Most of the games later today. We, I think on Thursday we gave these. We'll give them once again. Mississippi State and Ole Miss. It was Mississippi State 135-103. And on a Friday, Oklahoma and West Virginia. It was Oklahoma 59-56. Now this is these are basketball scores. We hope. Oh wait a minute, they're football scores. Well, they're football scores. Anyway, Washington and Washington State. It was Washington out of Seattle 28-15. UFC and South Florida. It was UFC 38-10. And finally, Texas and Kansas. It was Texas 24-17. We also, incidentally, have collegiate basketball coming along here, so we have to make sure where we are. Anyway, The NHL, the Rangers were at the Flyers, and the Rangers were shut out. Flyers 4-0. Canadians and Sabres, it was a Sabres 3-2 in overtime. The Islanders and Devils, it was the Islanders 4-3. The Red Wings and Capitals 3-1 over Detroit. The Jets and Wild, it was the Wild 4-2 over the Jets. The Oilers and the Anaheim Ducks, it was the Ducks 2-1 in an overtime. Everybody's in overtime these days. The Flames and Golden Knights, it was the Golden Knights, they shut out the Flames 2-0. The Maple Leafs and Blue Jackets 4-2. The Pelicans and Bruins in Boston 2-1 in an overtime there, Bruins. The Blackhawks and Lightning, was a Lightning 4-2 was the final there. The Panthers and Hurricanes 4-1. The Predators and the Blues in St. Louis. The Blues 6-2. The Senators and Stars, it was the Stars 6-4. And the Avalanche and Coyotes, hellacious name there, it was the Avalanche 5-1. And finally the Canucks and the Sharks. The Sharks shut out the Canucks 4-0. And that is the league there. And looking at these football scores, incidentally, and the challenge, the $9 million challenge out in Las Vegas, and on the lights, Phil Nicholson ended up with the $9 million challenge of Tiger Woods in 22 holes. That was one of those specialty kinds of rivalries there for display only. So that was basically where that particular situation went, and about all we can see. But anyway, we're coming up in October, in the end of November, and collegiate college football will start looking more towards the bowls. We'll have more of that. If my mouth is not too dry here, on the Monday morning quarterback, which will be on Monday morning. This will do it for us. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on a Sunday, the Jerry Pippen special. It would have been Jerry's 79th birthday.